Good afternoon and welcome to the 29th Annual Exhibit of Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies 2023 at the Hanover Fair. You can tell we've been here for a long time. We've always been discussing developments. There are small players, but important players. There are big players and very important players. And the next company we're going to be discussing, Plug Power, is no secret to anyone in the industry. It's a very, very big player. I'll be talking to Alistair Liebman, who is a European Sales Director at Plug Power. And we're going to be talking about fuel cells and applications. The devil is in the details. Please welcome with me Alistair Liebman.
Hi.
So, for the novices in the audience, of course, it's important to know what we're talking about. Let's talk about Plug Power first of all, where you are, who you are, and how big you are.
So first of all, thanks for having me. So I'm based in Madrid, in Spain, but the headquarters is in Paris, and we have a logistical center in Duisburg. As you all probably know, Plug Power is an American company based out of Latham. And about 3,000 employees, so massive growth over the past 5 years. Europe, we're around the 300 mark now, so Europe has also grown immensely over the past couple of years.
So you guys have no problem with the vacation locations, Spain, Paris. It sounds like a great place to work. Your business model is really divided. You do a number of things. Let's talk about the actual products, the actual focuses in your business.
Okay, so we have two main business units. The electrolyzer hydrogen production business unit, and then we have the applications business unit, which I work for.
And the applications business unit, of course, is applications of the classic PEM cell, hydrogen using.
Exactly. So it's the application of hydrogen in fuel cells. Mm-hmm. So we'll start discussing on the different applications we have. The main core business for the past 2 or 3 years has been material handling. Mm-hmm. Material handling, so forklifts, both in production plants and in just logistics in general. Mm-hmm. So we have 65,000 units working globally. We've accumulated more than 1 billion hours of running time. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, this year is a real transitional year for us because in the next 14 months, we'll be building 10 sites, which is more or less equivalent to what's been done in the past 10 years. So real good year, 2023 for us.
Yeah, this is really the last statistic is so important to understand the growth. We all know where we have to go. We have to replace not simply the energy distributed in the electrical grid, we have to also replace the use of renewable energies with some viable source. And energy is difficult to store when it's created from renewable sources. Without hydrogen, that is without electrolysis, we're not going to get that done. And without applications using them. The numbers are important because we have this example of China. In 1 year, China bought more fuel cells than in all the past years of fuel cell applications in history. The rate of growth is just phenomenal. How do you keep up with it? We always ask ourselves the question, we have so far to go still. Is it easy to scale up?
I don't think. I think Plug Power's strategy has been to scale up from the beginning. I think the correct investments have been made in the US and in Europe to do so. I was talking to my electrolyzer colleagues this morning. In this first quarter, we'll have produced 100 megawatts of electrolyzers, and in the second quarter, we're looking to triple that. So in terms of scaling up, I think we're on top of the game right now.
This is exponential growth. We should be aware of this. if you're looking to invest in a company, this is super important. We will return to the logistics, the materials handling applications there, because it's our first success story. But before we do that, you guys also do electrolyzers, a specific type of electrolyzers, and you have large volume there. Can you describe that branch of your business before we get back to the mobile applications?
Yeah. So I think there's in Europe we have multi-megawatt PEM electrolyzer programs coming up. So we've got one in Holland, one with the Port of Antwerp that we announced. Various in France, and obviously we have the joint venture with Acciona Plug. Acciona is a renewable company, probably the biggest one in Spain, and we're also developing a 25 megawatt plant in the north of Spain there. So talking of scaling up, so we're gradually generating at important volumes hydrogen across Europe.
In past conversations, if I go back 20 years, we'd be sitting here on the stage. There would be a group of engineers with laptops trying to get a fuel cell operating as a demonstration project. This is going back a long time, of course. We've come a long way. What I find so interesting about you is you come from the business side. And it's very fascinating when we hear this thing. Just a minute, the consumers, they want a product. And they want a product simply because it actually is economically a good proposition. So can we go back to the history? The first success story for us were material handling vehicles simply because they operate indoors, no diesel engines. They're competing with batteries. So what are the advantages of not using batteries alone or using only a fuel cell? So could you tell a bit about that history and how it moves into now actually delivery vehicles?
I'll do my best effort at telling the story. I wasn't actually part of it, but basically I think back in the day, one of our current clients asked us to do the entire turnkey solution. So the compression of the hydrogen, the dispensers, and the fuel cells. We were basically just concentrating on the fuel cells. So once we connected the dots, this is how we managed to then roll out, and with clients such as, for example, Amazon, who's I think publicly known as one of our largest clients for material handling, basically has invested in fuel cells in their distribution centers, and that's because the business case works, right?
So it is a business proposition model. That's one important field simply because we have volume. Volume is so important, of course, because the costs drop with added volume. Does this translate to other mobile applications? And what are the other mobile applications that we see coming at us?
So we've got a couple of, so moving away from material handling, stationary power is the next big thing for Plug. We're developing a megawatt containerized solution for stationary power. We were looking just to replace typical diesel gensets, but lately our strategy is focused on EV chargers. I think as companies roll out on their centralized electrical car strategy, they're finding that locally they're getting restrained by the grid. So the initial electrical consumption did not take into account, 20, 40, 50 electrical vehicles, and therefore the capacity on site is not there. Now, with our megawatt stationary product, we are capable of allowing these companies to continue with their EV rollout, at least until they were to get normal grid connection.
This is, I want to unpack that message because it's so fundamental. We've had several politicians from Germany visit us today, and we know that they're all in favor of expanding electrical vehicles. The story that's not always told with that proposition is whether the grid was ever intended to handle this amount of energy. and distribute this amount of energy. And one of the ways of dealing with that would be to simply say, okay, we've got to double or triple the amount of copper from one end of the country to the other. Doing this locally makes great sense, doesn't it? You've got a local production of electrical energy, so you're storing renewable energy as close to the electrolyzer as possible. You use that whenever you have a pile of people connecting their cars at the same time, and all of a sudden the electrical vehicle becomes a viable proposition. I find this so fascinating because you have colleagues in your company who will tell us we're going to run out of copper. It's not a viable proposition. Do you have right now these scalable megawatt facilities in operation?
No, so we currently have a 3 megawatt pilot with Microsoft in the States. One of the initial focuses was on data centers and backup energy for data centers. However, as we just discussed, it really seems as if it makes sense when it comes to EV chargers, and currently the grid is constrained, and this is a way out of it without having to basically stop the rollout for electrical vehicles.
Yeah, this is actually a huge issue. It's a huge issue. Mobility used to be this focus on the consumer car. 2004, we had engineers on the stage saying that, look at this hydrogen fuel cell car. Boy, do they look sexy. Everyone wants one. And we're going to have 100,000 of these vehicles on the road by 2008 or 2006. None of this has happened. And this is also up your alley. It's a business question. It's a question of where the applications of mobile hydrogen vehicles are going to make sense financially. This can be related to several issues. If you have back-to-base vehicles, delivery vehicles, you don't need to set up an entire infrastructure of refueling. If you buy a car as a consumer vehicle, you soon discover that you can't really drive it all over the place if there's no network of fueling stations. So this is the question of the entry possibilities for mobile applications. Where do you see them, and how are they developing?
I think that's a good introduction to our third application, which is HYVIA. We have a joint venture with Renault. It's called HYVIA. It's for the Renault Master. And this represents our strategy. So for last mile vehicles, electrical batteries seem to be, in some cases, especially with heavy loads, maybe not as efficient as they should be, and therefore hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, because there is a battery inside the vehicle, could be the perfect option for deliveries to the center of European capital cities, for example. So HYVIA, we've developed the Renault Master, and we'll have 500, there's a capacity of 1,000 vehicles, production per year.
It's so interesting for me. One has to really look at that proposition from two different perspectives. One is, because it's a business model for your company, one is you produce the fuel cells for delivery vehicles, for example, or for heavy-duty mobility, the garbage trucks that could run on hydrogen. By the way, they're silent. I want one of those in my neighborhood. You could use fuel cells, or you could use electricity. And the interesting thing from the business perspective, I learned this from you today, by the way, is this distribution of the ability to use renewable energy to create a distributed energy structure. Also implies your business model, which is electrolysis and hydrogen storage. It really is a toss of the coin, isn't it? That is, do you use an entirely electrical vehicle? Your product is still necessary in the form of electrolysis, and then PEM cells that generate electricity on demand whenever people are refueling their electrical vehicles? Or do you use the hydrogen directly? Do you have any sort of philosophy? Most people are indifferent to issues like this. They say, let the consumer decide. Let the application people figure out whether the batteries have enough range or whether you need added range because the hydrogen-fueled vehicles travel a bit further. Do you have your own personal take on that?
Yeah, and we definitely do, and it's and not or. So, so hashtag and not or. Okay. We definitely think that batteries have their application and fuel cells have their application, and material handling is a good example. So we can they can live together, and specific to material handling, high utilization fleets has been the secret behind developing the fuel cells for the industry and reaching 60,000 fuel cells, which we were told the other day, 30% of all the food deliveries in the pandemic in the States were done with a fuel cell propelled forklift, right? So some interesting facts coming out of using fuel cells for, and 60,000 of them, yeah.
Every third mouth to feed is supplied by renewable energy in the form of hydrogen. We may have time for one quick question from the audience, if there is a question. We're getting close to the end. By the way, the real conversation begins at the booth, of course. Alistair Liepman is, where is your booth located? It's...
Yeah, just I think it's just down the corridor.
Yeah, down the corridor in this direction, and you can join him there for further conversation. My last question, of course, is always, where is this going? Everyone has this sense of rapid growth, rapid expansion. It's necessary environmentally. It's necessary bitterly. We've noted this in Germany because we need strategic energy security, and we do not have it. And of course, the environmental concerns are obvious. Where's the growth going to happen?
I think especially in countries where the grid is an issue. So there's specific European countries where grid restriction is there, and fuel cells and the applications we have are an alternative to the decarbonization programs that are probably considered with only batteries, and that when they roll out, they will eventually find out that they also need to consider fuel cells for certain applications because there's no grid to electrify the whole thing.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you very much. There's so much that we can talk about. There's so much that we can add. There's a lot of detail. But this is a great overview of a wonderful company, Plug Power. I've been talking with Alistair Liepman, who is the European Sales Director, about fuel cells and applications. It's been a pleasure to have you here. It's the first time you have been on stage with me from Plug Power. They've been around for ages at this fair. Hope to see you back next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alistair.
Thanks.